you a Pacifica state of mind since 1960. The previous program was the Jordan Journal with Howard Jordan, heard Fridays, starting at 3 p.m. Thank you, Earth Mom, for those announcements from the Community Bulletin Board. Stay tuned for State of the Arts NYC with Savona Bailey-McClain coming up. Stay tuned. It's 5 p.m.
Good evening. This is State of the Arts NYC with your host, Savona Bailey-McClain, where we cover art. And tonight, we celebrate our second anniversary on the air. Congratulations, State of the Arts. And with that, we are going to kick off this evening with a conversation with Lilly Tuttle. And Lilly Tuttle is the Associate Curator at the Museum of the City of New York, and we're going to be talking with Lilly about their brand new exhibition, Art in the Open, 50 Years of Public Art in New York. And it's an exhibition that celebrates and examines the last half century of art and innovation that has made the City of New York the most vibrant environment for public creativity in the world. So, we're going to get started. So, Lilly, are you with us?
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That's fantastic. And thank you for, coming onto our second anniversary show. You may not be aware of it, but our listeners know that I have been curating public art, and that will be this January 1st, 2018 for 20 years.
Wow. Congratulations. That's quite a milestone.
Thank you so very, very much. And so this is interesting because public art has become a major topic now in New York City. Over the last several months, there has been the Ai Weiwei exhibition that's in several locations honoring the 40th anniversary of the Public Art Fund. There now are commission hearings regarding public art and permanent monuments, talking about their historical relevance, how they are being interpreted. Then there's also other works that are being presented throughout the city. It's just been quite a year when it comes to public art, wouldn't you say?
I would. And I would say, too, that, I think that's one of the great things about public art is that it becomes a forum for public dialogue, that it's a way for people to come together and talk as a community about our values, and really it becomes a way for people to understand each other better, and I think that that's something that we've seen evolving through this 50-year story that we talk about in the exhibition.
All right, and so we are going to talk about that 50-year journey, and so for a lot of our audience, a lot of people don't realize that this show is focusing on just a few institutions that present public art, primarily the Public Art Fund. It talks about the Municipal Art Society and how it played a role in the formation of the Public Art Fund, how Doris Freeman was that person who galvanized everything that took place, how it's been a part of it kind of went under the Department of Cultural Affairs, and then it went under the Department of Parks and Recreation, how under Mayor Bloomberg and the former commissioner for the Department of Transportation, they decided to expand public art under that agency. And so now we have more public art on streets and on bridges and viaducts and tunnels. So it has been morphing quite a bit. And I know, Lilly, that your specialty is about New York City from approximately, 1898 moving forward?
Yes, I would say that. I mean, I am a historian, and I guess I'm probably more of an expert on the 20th century. And when I was in graduate school, I looked at the role of public art in redevelopment that happened in the city really in the 60s and 70s, which is where our story begins. So, yes, I concur with your assessment of my focus.
So tell us a little bit about this exhibition, and we hope that people will come out to the Museum of City of New York. It's a beautiful space along Fifth Avenue on Museum Mile, where you have Museo del Barrio, you have your museum, and as people keep going down, you have the Jewish Museum, the Metropolitan of Art, naturally, and this gives people this kind of breadth of knowledge, information, and very poignant art. So help us with this journey about this exhibition.
Sure, and before I dive in on the exhibition, I also have to let your listeners know that we are offering free admission this weekend as we celebrate the 1-year anniversary of New York at its core, which is our exhibition that covers the dramatic 400-year sweep of New York City history, as well as an interactive exhibition on the future. So that opened back in November. We are celebrating its 1-year anniversary, and so we are offering free admission through Sunday the 19th. So this is a particularly good time to come up to the museum.
Okay.
But to tell you a little bit about the exhibition, we are trying in our museum gallery to encapsulate this 50-year story of public art in New York City. Public art was really part of a particular moment in the city's history in the late 1960s for a variety of reasons. But in short, the reason that this became something that sort of emerged at this time in the 60s, and I should back up and say that New York had always had public art of a sort, that we have things like the Statue of Liberty is perhaps the city's most iconic piece of public art, and we have murals that were painted in various public buildings during the Great Depression. But this was a moment in the 60s when the voice of the individual artist and works of truly cutting-edge art were liberated, so to speak, from museums and galleries and placed out into the open in public spaces. And this came about for a variety of reasons. It was something that was part of a national moment of rethinking the role of arts in American society that goes back to the 60s and the Cold War and the Kennedy administration and the founding of the National Endowment for the Arts in 1965. But in New York City, in the late 60s, we had a very creative, charismatic mayor named John Lindsay, who recognized the fact that New York was in many ways on the brink of a crisis.
Okay.
The city had experienced a sort of outgrowth or outmigration of people moving to the suburbs. The economy was kind of on a rocky stance as various industries were drying up in the city, and there was basically a period of crisis was approaching. And so art and various tools of cultural programming became valuable to the city and really a good opportunity to help maintain the city's image and appearance of vitality and livability and just general attractiveness at this time. The city was also undergoing big physical changes in the late 60s. There had been a lot of redevelopment. Urban renewal had really transformed the city in the 1950s. There was a zoning change in 1961 that made it appealing for developers to build large buildings with these big, wide, open plazas.
Right.
And so there were new spaces in the city that cried out for art, that cried out for beauty and adornment.
So it's almost like a second beautification movement.
I think that's a great way. Yes, exactly. Like very similar to the beautification movement of the early 20th century. And what you're seeing instead of patriotic sculptures with, representing civic virtues and the idea of, wisdom and liberty, you're seeing cutting-edge sculpture by living contemporary artists who were themselves living through this time of the 1960s, the era of the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War, when there was a a general kind of heightened consciousness about the social role of art and the role of artists to connect through their work.
Could you give
and
us...
that art needed to be, moving out into the public.
Right. Could you give us a couple of examples
of some of the works that
yes.
were, so in 1967, there was a landmark exhibition. There were actually two landmark exhibitions. There was one in Bryant Park in January of 67 of the work of Tony Smith. And then in the fall of 1967, there was a multi-site exhibition, various parks and plazas in Manhattan, called Sculpture and Environment. And this was something that the great Doris Friedman was involved in organizing.
Okay.
And this was exactly as you said, when the Department of Cultural Affairs was under the auspices of the Parks Department. And there were a number of really interesting, creative, unique pieces that came out of this project. Klaus Oldenburg dug a grave in Central Park for his work, for his installation. And then one of the key pieces of this that I think is a story that a lot of New Yorkers don't know is the cube, the famous cube at Astor Place.
Right.
It's actually called Alamo, and it's a piece by an artist named Tony Rosenthal. And it was so popular after it was installed in Astor Place. It was intended initially to be a temporary piece.
Okay.
And, of course, the cube is
still there, yeah.
Yeah, the icon of Astor Place.
Ah, that story I did not know. That's a nice little story.
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay, so go ahead. I just wanted people to have some frame of reference, and knowing about Astor Place is very important for people to know. Mm-hmm.
Well, and it was shortly thereafter then that the Parks Department adopted a temporary public art program. Mm-hmm. And they, too, are celebrating a 50th anniversary this fall. They just had a big celebration in Central Park, commemorating 50 years of their Art in the Parks program.
Wow.
But so what you see over this 50-year timeline that we highlight in the exhibition is the fact that very shortly thereafter there was a real blossoming of different opportunities and programs for public art programming in the city, not just through public means, but organizations like City Walls and the Public Arts Council, and then eventually the Public Art Fund in 1977. Those were all entities that Doris Friedman founded after Sculpture and Environment. Likewise, Creative Time is founded in 1973, and then we get a Percent for Art program in the 1980s, Arts for Transit. And what we've seen in the 21st century is as the city continues to evolve and, the physical spaces of the city continue to change, we get this really flourishing population of venues where art can happen. So, for example, when the High Line opens, or Brooklyn Bridge Park, or Fresh Kills on Staten Island is turned into parkland, art is part and parcel with that transformation. New developments or even abandoned sites become available to public art programming.
Well, yes and no. That's the only thing I have a disagreement about.
Okay.
Because I have done public art in New York City for 20 years, and that is, art in New York City is for the rich. It really is. It's for the rich. And if you don't have money, you're not able to present public art. It's really, really tough to present public art. I deal with that. I stay broke all the time. And because it is such a very rich venue. And what has happened over the decades is that for organizations that are from poorer neighborhoods, or organizations that are small, or curators who are representing, artists of color, we're usually pushed towards dealing with murals. I've only presented one mural in all of the years I've been a curator. One mural, and that was basically a banner that we did under the mural program that the Parks Department had. It's a little tiny program. A lot of people don't know about it. The approval process is quick. It's very easy. And I did it in partnership with the Friends of the East River Esplanade. And when I did it was a couple of years ago, and they begged me to please work with them to present this. And so I said, okay, but, you know, the location they wanted was kind of tough, 116th Street and the FDR. And the fencing in that area had been neglected for many years. And I said, well, we can't do nothing here because people are going to fall into the East River. So it was about me calling up the Parks Department saying, hey, do you realize how bad this fence is? It's a hazard. Somebody's going to fall. Somebody is going to get hurt. And they did. It took a few months, but not too long. They repaired the fence, and then we placed this huge, it was like 7 feet long, no, 10 feet long, 7 feet high, banner that was under the mural program. It was so successful. I said, we'll place it there in time for freeze. And when people are driving to Randall's Island, they will assume this is a part of freeze. And just like I said, that's how people saw it. So it was this instant hit. We got in 5 publications, including the Wall Street Journal, in the same week. Everyone's mouth had dropped. We didn't think we were going to get that much press.
Wow.
And that's minor considering other things I've done. But the point is, there were constraints. And so what I'm saying to you is, yes, these great murals and monuments and sculptures have been done. The only problem I have is that it hasn't been evenly done throughout all of New York City. And the places that you mentioned, the High Line, the Brooklyn Bridge Park, Fresh Kills, a lot of money has been pumped into those areas. And so, yes, they have a magnificent public art program. I've had the High Line on my show, Madison Square Park, but in a lot of other neighborhoods around New York City, there isn't any public art. It's very difficult. And then even the people within those communities, they don't understand why you would want to do it in their neighborhood. They don't see why that would be a blessing for them. So that's the only different thing, you know, a disagreement I have is just that when it comes to those prime locations with a lot of money, you're going to get good public art. I mean, stellar work. But when you're trying to do like what I'm doing and maybe some other groups, and there's only a few of us that are trying to do this, we struggle to get that public art up, to get those permits, to get the insurance, to get, you know, the works installed, deinstalled, maintained. It's tough. I'm still, you know, paying for works that have been done. So, yes, it's just a lot different. That's all I wanted to say.
No, and I take your point completely that we have, as New York has, you know, we are such a different city than we were in the 1970s. Everything's more expensive. Everything is more big and bold and ambitious. Of course, the art will follow suit with that trend. So I completely take your point. I would say, though, one thing that has impressed me in my research and journey on this project is the role of the Percent for Art program in the city and the way in which, and I think this is something that's been surprising to a lot of our visitors, that how Percent for Art works and the fact that city buildings, you know, and this includes libraries and schools and prisons and waste transfer stations and, you know, fire department and police precincts, and that is something that does place art in buildings all across the 5 boroughs, and that it's something that and I agree, it's not as pervasive or as concentrated in places like the High Line or what you see in you know, sort of the central areas of Manhattan, but it does make those buildings and those sites all across the city, you know, that there's always a touch of art there, that there's something where you, it's a recognition of the neighborhood through the Percent for Art project, which I think is something that is really, as I said, I think it's really surprising to a lot of our visitors how that came about and what it continues to do in the city.
Oh, yes. Our Percent for Art, I think, is the first one, one of the first ones in the country.
One of the first ones.
And the only thing is a couple of other cities have surpassed us with 2% for art. Now, that would be...
Well, that's a goal.
Yes, I think that should be a goal, 2% for art. Mm-hmm. But, yes, we're one of the first in the city, and I think that's great. And you're right, you mentioned also Art in Transit with Sandra Bloodworth. And for many years, Kendall Henry was working with Sandra. Now he's with DCA. Excellent curator. Yes, we have done some very interesting and marvelous things. I just want to push that envelope. And I know you got some public programs that's going to be coming up. Tell us about that. Will those public discussions help push the envelope so that we can have more public art as well as public art funding across the city?
Yes, absolutely. So we do have a number of great public programs coming up. Our first one is Thursday, November the 30th. Mm-hmm. That's our first public program right after Thanksgiving, called Love It or Hate It, Public Art and Controversy. So as you mentioned at the outset, this is a very timely topic. And we have a really exciting panel here. I will tell you who's on deck. We have Audrey Flack, who is a painter and sculptor. We have Kendall Henry, who you mentioned before, who is the current director of Percent for Art, who is himself an artist and curator. We have Ohad Maromi, who is an Israeli-born sculptor who created a sculpture recently in Queens.
Oh, honey, that's controversial. Oh, Lord.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the subject of this panel.
Oh, man.
Controversy.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Go ahead.
So he's coming on up to the museum, and he will be in conversation with Harriet Senni.
I know Harriet.
Yeah, she's wonderful. And she, of course, literally wrote the book on Tilted Arc, which is one of the all-time big New York City public art controversies.
Richard
Serra down at Federal Plaza. And then the panel will be moderated by Michelle Bogart, who's a professor at Stony Brook University. And she has a new book coming out very soon about public art in New York City. Okay. So we're very excited about this program. I think it's a great way to kick off our series and to kick off the exhibition. I will be there. And if you want more information about it, you just check out our website at mcny.org. And I think it's going to be a really good one. Okay. And then later on through the course of the run of the show's open until May 13th. Mm-hmm. We are offering a tour of some of the new art in the 2nd Avenue subway. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, MTA Arts and Design is an incredible agency. They were very generous to us through the course of this exhibition, and we have a great case study in the exhibition about the work that they do, and we feature, a few artists, including Zenobia Bailey, who...
Oh, you got Zenobia, yeah.
Oh, yes, we have one of her beautiful textiles
at the train station at the Hudson Yard is magnificent.
At Hudson Yards.
Yeah.
And so we're offering a walking tour with MTA Arts and Design of the new stations of the 2nd Avenue subway, which is along with Zenobia's work, some of the most really bold and ambitious work that they have ever done. We are doing a program with two of the artists who are featured in the exhibition, Tanya Bruguera and Kate Gilmore,
right?
Talking about feminism and performance art. And then in the spring, we will have a program that we are calling State of the Public Art, with current curators and organizations that represent what we're calling new directions in public art. And there we will have representatives from the High Line, from the Laundromat Project, and from Governor's Island, as well as a couple other speakers, just talking about really, as we wind down the exhibition in the spring, the future of public art in New York City.
Interesting. All right. Well, I just want to thank you so much, Lilly, for joining us today and talking about public art and this exhibition at the Museum of the City of New York. And I just want to thank your team for letting me know about the exhibition. I'm hoping our audience will follow up and go, particularly to hear that first talk that's controversial, because I think that will be a packed house. And we look forward to working with the museum continuously in 2018.
Thank you so much for having me, and I invite everyone to come up this weekend when we have free admission for all. So, yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And we are back with State of the Arts NYC for our second anniversary show where we cover art. And we just had Lilly Tuttle on our show representing the Museum of the City of New York and their brand new exhibition about art in the open. It's covering 50 years of public art in New York City. Now, for our anniversary, we are going to share with you several past interviews throughout the year that we believe you will enjoy hearing again. We're doing this so that you can be reminded about why State of the Arts is important, why it is heard on WBAI FM radio, and why we are making inroads in the arts community throughout all 5 boroughs. So our first interview is going to be the Basquiat interview, where we had Ayanna Legros talk about how Basquiat's latest works sold at $110 million. So I'm with Ayanna Legros, and we're in Midtown near Columbus Circle, and I wanted to talk with her about Basquiat and the fabulous news about his recent work that sold over $110 million at the auction house, making Basquiat one of the top American artists now in the country, and to get her response and her reaction to the news.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, and part of me was very obviously excited. The other part of me was not surprised. I think that Basquiat is someone that has a cultural capital, unlike many artists today. He's at the point where there's a makeup line after him with Urban Decay. He's had clothing lines fashioned after him. Musical artists have quoted him and his work and kind of see him as a muse. And so he has a very type of potency that is intergenerational. And in a lot of ways, it made a lot of sense that he hit that level that he did.
So do you feel that in America right now, there's been more of an acceptance of artists of color and the messages that they are conveying, because their message isn't typical from a lot of these younger artists, where it might be more generalized, or it may be based on certain issues like the environment or climate change. At that time, Basquiat was really sending some very strong messages, and he embedded it in his work. It wasn't overt. You had to think about it. You had to probe. You had to be a part of it. So would you say that now various collectors are taking people of color more seriously? And if so, what do you think is causing all of that?
I mean, I'm not sure that I would say that collectors are necessarily understanding or deeply engaging with the messages, but I think that there's a clear realization that Black people have capital. People of color have capital in this country.
Okay.
And everyone wants a piece of that. Everyone from, fashion companies to makeup lines to magazines. Everyone wants a piece of that capital. And I think that now in this country, there is a desire to understand, I think particularly in this Trump moment, like how did we get here? And I think that this nation's becoming more honest about its history and its past in a lot of ways.
Okay.
But I think that for people of color, and particularly artists, there is a desire to engage with that work more. And now you're in a space in which, you don't have to only go to certain institutions to see an artist from Mexico. You can now go to the Whitney to see an artist from Mexico. There is definitely a movement, without a doubt, to diversify museums. But I would have to say that push really did come from communities of color that were seeking to kind of change the conversation.
Okay, so then you're seeing more improvements coming in the future.
Yeah, I would say so.
And it's not going to be like the same voices all the time. Every time there's a panel, every time there's a discussion, you're seeing the same people, you're hearing the same names. Maybe now there's going to be a concerted effort to engage more voices across the diaspora and not necessarily, from Ivy Tower institutions. Would you say?
In terms of a real grassroots effort, I think it's going to take time, as you mentioned. But I think that there is a desire to engage. Engagement, I would say, is definitely happening. But I think it once again links back to the fact that there is this realization that people of color have capital.
I like that because I didn't expect you to say that because it seems like so much effort and time is spent on proving that we have capital. You're actually saying that people do now understand and acknowledge that there is capital. They're being honest about that.
Definitely.
Well, that's good. Well, I'm glad because I really wanted to get a Black perspective of this very important moment in the art world, that Basquiat, and I wish he was here so that he could enjoy this. It's a shame that he had to die and then become an even more bigger superstar, but it would have been nice for him to have been here so he could experience this and understand that, he really truly was appreciated.
Yes, he was. And I think it's going to take time. I think I'll be fully excited when there's not just one monograph on him. It's like, because I remember when I was first starting off with the project, alongside a colleague, the Basquiat Still Fly at 55 project, I was shocked at how little literature there was on him. There's only one, full-blown monograph on him written by Jordana Sagesse. And outside of that, you can find books about kind of different chapters or different pieces, but not really a full-fledged picture about the man's life because his story is so important to New York City history.
Yes.
I mean, it's not just about his art, it's about what he represents to downtown New York. That isn't what it used to be,
Totally.
NoHo, Soho, all that is a completely different area. And I would say that the type of work that he could have produced then, there was an environment, not just socially and artistically, but also financially. And now to find people of color engaging, and having that lifestyle, it's really hard. New York is really expensive.
Yes, it is.
And so the cost of the city is going to also shift the type of artists that can be in this space. So I don't know if there could be a Basquiat in 2017. You know what I'm saying? Like,
gotcha.
if we had the same person, same story, same narrative, would he be expected to have a master's in art history? Probably, There's a certain kind of professionalization that Yasmin Ramirez talks about. She knew Basquiat, and she mentions that a lot. that now if you're an artist, you have to have a certain type of education, a certain type of language, a certain type of way of carrying yourself. And Basquiat was all about breaking barriers, breaking stereotypes, breaking norms. He did whatever he wanted
to do.
Exactly. So to have that type of figure would be really different today.
That's very interesting what you're saying, that the time in which he created was very unique, and that perhaps we would not have this great kind of artists in our present day.
Yeah.
The circumstances of rent,
Yeah.
circumstances of material, the circumstances of technology may make this all very difficult to get somebody. Because I always remember the documentary I saw on Basquiat when he was at Gagosian's in L.A. When I saw those white walls painted extra white,
Yeah.
and then his work placed there, my mouth dropped. It was like, that's when I saw the genius. It was like, you needed that so that you could really focus on the work, and my mouth was like, oh my God, this man was ahead of his time.
Oh, totally. And when you're ahead of your time, sometimes your fire goes out faster than anybody else's.
Yes.
But I do see people making, I do see people making an effort to have more conversations about him. Is it sometimes superficial and kind of surface? Yes, but for me, one of my passions at the moment is to create a collection of essays on him, because I think that he was so engaged with so many different types of identities. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there was a children's book published on him called The Radiant Child.
No, I did not know.
By Javaka Steptoe, and it won a prize in children's literature. And so it's exciting to see that people are also seeking to just have a positive narrative about him, not just about, Basquiat as a guy that was drug overdose, or Basquiat as a guy that was, did graffiti. No, he's a respected artist. He thought about his work. It was not random. And he touched upon really sensitive and critical themes of American society.
But I just want to thank you for participating, giving us your response. We're going to put this out on the air. We're going to put it out online. We want people to hear more about Basquiat, and I still love the title of your project, Basquiat Still Fly at 55. Thank you.
And I want to take a moment to also shout out Janelle Ajani,
Yes.
who started this project with me. We were both graduate students at New York University in the Master's in Africana Studies, so it was a really exciting collaboration.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. This is our second anniversary show. And now we're going to get ready to hear one of our museum reviews from our contributor, Irene Javors. And this one was The Rise of Russian Avant-Garde. It was a museum exhibition that took place this year.
This is Irene Javors reporting for State of the Arts, New York City, about an extremely interesting and timely exhibit currently at the Museum of Modern Art, Manhattan, New York City. The show is A Revolutionary Impulse, The Rise of the Russian Avant-Garde. The exhibit spans the decades from 1912 to the 1930s and focuses on the radical art movements that erupted before the Russian Revolution of 1917. Through to the repressive demands of the Stalinist socialist realism beginning in the early 1930s. All of the artwork is drawn from the museum's own collection and features the arts in all forms of expression: painting, photography, graphic design, illustrated books of literature and poetry, ceramics, film, architecture, posters, and sculpture. The works of leading artists of the period, such as El Lissitzky, Kazimir Malevich, Vasily Kandinsky, Alexander Rodchenko, Alexander Dovchenko, and filmmakers who experimented with and developed montage, Zirka Vertov and Sergei Eisenstein are shown. Of particular note are the number of women who had attained prominence within the Russian avant-garde, artists such as Natalia Koncharova, Leopold Popova, Olga Rosanova, and many others. The viewer is also introduced to the many art movements that developed during the pre-revolutionary and revolutionary periods, constructivism and supremacism, movements that experimented with new ideas and forms of abstraction. As I walked through this exhibit, I could feel the exciting revolutionary energies emanating from the art, the urgency to break free and out of old forms and find new paths. Throughout the show, there are quotes from artists' manifestos of the period that extol the coming of a new order. Here is an example by the artist Leopold Popova. "We are breaking with the past because we cannot accept its hypotheses. We ourselves are creating our own hypotheses anew, and only upon them can we build new life and new worldview." As we enter the final rooms of the exhibit, we are made aware that the exhilaration and promise of the artistic and political revolutions of 1917 were severely compromised by the increasing repression of socialist realism that demanded the arts conform to the dictates of Stalinist revolutionary dogma. I left the exhibit wondering what would have developed in Russian art had there not been such repression. A revolutionary impulse, the rise of the Russian avant-garde, is on exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art until March 12, 2017. Highly recommended. This is Irene Javors, State of the Arts, New York City.
And that was Irene Javors, our museum contributor for our Museum Edge. And then we'll wrap the show up with a wonderful, wonderful interview we had this year with Arturo O'Farill, Latin jazz Grammy-winning artist. Okay, we are waiting for that interview with Arturo O'Farill. We had to use it from a previous show and we experienced a little difficulty, but it was a great opportunity for me to talk with Mr. O'Farill again because many, many years ago, Mr. O'Farill was gracious enough to work with my arts organization talking about public art to give a concert with Jazz at Lincoln Center in Harlem at St. Nicholas Park. It was quite amazing to have Mr. O'Farill there to play. And we did this, and it was quite a night where Mr. O'Farill performed. We did it also with the sponsor was Lincoln, the card company, and they were there to help us, and we showcased some of their new Escalades, and we also had a sculpture that was done in ice. And we were very pleased with all the food that we were able to present for VIPs and to the public and have a sort of family-style picnic going on so they can enjoy outdoors in the open air jazz in their own neighborhood in Harlem. And so now we're getting ready so that you can hear that interview.
I'm here. I can't believe you're talking about me. I was wondering, who's that? Believe me, my wife doesn't think I'm now.
Now, we know each other, but you probably don't remember. Several years ago, several years ago, you did a concert at St. Nicholas Park. And do you remember now?
I remember doing one right at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, at 135th
Right at the bottom
Street.
of the hill.
That was the reason why that concert took place.
I remember that.
Yes.
I remember that. It was amazing. It was actually a part of the Ford.
Ford was involved. Oh, boy, Lord have mercy. That was a lot because Ford wanted to have, an ice sculpture. And the city of New York didn't want that ice sculpture there because they wanted to do it in the Cadillac logo. And so I was dealing with Jazz at Lincoln Center, and we were telling Cadillac we can't do that because the city of New York said no. So sure enough, the night of the event, we had that private little tent where people had food, and these two young men, they were so proud that they were bringing that ice sculpture, and they came in screaming, and here we are, we got the Cadillac ice sculpture, and I'm looking, and I almost passed out, and Jazz at Lincoln Center almost passed out. We said, oh no, and this person from Parks was there chewing us out saying, why did y'all bring that here? You're not supposed to do that. And we almost passed out. We almost did. So what we did, just to let you know what we did, we went and got an intern, and we told him, go down the street there, 135th Street and 8th Avenue. There was a liquor store there. We said, can you bring back a bottle of scotch? And they did. And we went and got a flask, and we put some scotch in that and some other, I don't know, some sort of juice, because we all needed a drink, and it was all female.
That's beautiful. Drinking, did you say female?
Females, it was all females. We needed a drink because we said, oh, God, can we just get through this night? But you performed.
Know what? Drinking is not just for the old boys, I'm telling you. There's and it's funny because that very day, I'll tell you a background story behind that particular concert.
Uh-huh.
There was a big, tension brewing between our trumpet player and our drummer.
Really?
Now, I shouldn't say this because we ended up playing beautifully together anyway. But I don't remember what happened. They were sound checking and something was going in the monitor, and the other one started asking for something else in the monitor, and you know how one thing leads to another, and before you know it, they're at each other's throats.
Really?
And I'm like, well, gentlemen, please, this is not worth it.
It's true. Life is too short.
It's just music.
Ah.
You know, and that doesn't mean the music isn't the most beautiful and wonderful thing in life. But at the end of the day, community, unity, life itself has got to be where we get music from. Not just music can't be the end all be all, because then what's the point?
Yes, I agree with you. So I just wanted to share that because afterwards the Parks Department told me, Savona, if you ever want to do that again and bring Jazz at Lincoln Center, that'd be all right with us. Because they were there. They listened to the music, and they said, that was kind of good there. I was like, thank you, God.
You know what? You did the right thing because you stuck up for the music. The music prevailed, and people are happy to have concerts.
Yeah. And we need more of that art in open public spaces. It's kind of tough.
That was my baby. That was my baby when I was at Jazz Lincoln Center. That's my baby now with my organization. That's my baby when I tour, when I go into foreign countries. I say, we need to be doing free concerts for people in outdoor settings more than anything else that matters. That is the single most important thing. Hold on a second. Yeah, Happy New Year, brother. I'm sorry. That's on old friend. But the most important thing that we can do, literally, is give it away.
Yeah. So tell us about you and the Winter Jazz Fest, because, this is this is great what's happening in New York City this month, that there's so many festivals and performances all over the place.
Well, Winter Jazz Fest, I think, has always been a very important institution because it really does give voice to such a wide range of artists that don't necessarily get the Lincoln Center marquee, for instance, and I think that's important. The Lincoln Center represents one slice of the picture, but, because of who Bryce is and because of the people who program Winter Jazz Fest, you get to see a really, really much larger swath of what is going on in the world of jazz, and I think it's really important. Plus, it reflects a more egalitarian view of this music because, festival passes are bought and you get to see a lot of stuff for a single price, as opposed to paying ridiculous amounts of money per concert to see stuff, it's beautiful music nonetheless, but I think it reflects more of where young people are at with regards to how they view music.
Right.
Young people don't have the money to go into the seriously elite institutions, but they still want to hear music, and so they go out to clubs and they listen to things that they love and pay the prices they can afford. And I think Winter Jazz Fest reflects this beautifully.
Yeah, also, it's just that there are not that many jazz clubs in New York City anymore. And that's really kind of hard.
Well, there's like 5 or 6 name ones, and then a lot of little ones, and a lot of little ones that don't pay anything, And so young musicians don't have a place to play, and they certainly can't make a living at it.
Right. And that's why I like this, having this festival and different other, jazz festivals, so people can hear what is America's music. Jazz is an American art form, a blend of European symphonic and blues and other types of rhythms that are incorporated. It's our music. It's our blend. But yet a lot of people still don't seem to embrace it the way they need to.
What's beautiful about what you're saying, which I think is amazing, is that in a very big sense, jazz is American music in a large, not just because of what it means to, North America, but it's also part of the fabric of day-to-day life from the beginning in South America. So for me, when people say jazz is America's music, jazz is America's classical music, they're talking about everything from the tip of Chile up to the Prudhoe Bay in Alaska. They talk about like a place where only the African diaspora and Europe and the New World could explode in such a meaningful overcoming of a cataclysm called the slave trade, and create something beyond beautiful out of something that is beyond terrible.
Yes, I think,
and this is important. So what you're saying is beautiful.
Yeah, and what you just said something that was important. We sometimes focus on the negative of America's history, but we don't tend to see what came out of that, sort of horror. And, slavery is terrible. The history of it, the abuses are terrible. But then somehow something good did generate out of it. And it was this sort of, mix of expressions and music and dance and that we can celebrate. And I think that's, wonderful, because we had a guest earlier who was talking about his musical sort of theater installation that dealt with spirituals and how that's American. And then we had another guest who was talking about his adaptation of this Gothic, Irish story. All of that is really American, this blend of all these different people from all over the world. And since we're talking about, politics and building walls and all this other kind of stuff, we need to think about how we need to come together, wouldn't you say?
Well, I would say that the father, or one of the earliest fathers of jazz, Jelly Roll Morton, said that without the Spanish tinge, there is no jazz.
Yeah.
And so that exercise between Havana and New Orleans and the Louisiana Purchase and Cuba, and then as it makes its way up the Mississippi and down the coast of Mexico and into South America, that's all part of the great American story. And you can't say the word jazz without really thinking about the power of this music to transform lives and to migrate geographies. So it is like all the great innovations of humanity. It is something that transcends nationalism, borders. It's something that comes from a place, but goes out and returns sevenfold. And it's a beautiful thing, this music.
Yeah. And so tell us, what are you doing particularly special during the Winter Jazz Fest?
Well, tonight we're performing at 11 o'clock
at
the Tishman Auditorium in the new school with my quintet, helping to celebrate what would have been the 100th anniversary of Thelonious Monk. And there's nothing to me that talks about freedom of spirit and the genius of imagination than Monk. Monk was a gentleman. We have a funny story with Monk's musicians. We laugh because we feel like Monk would never be able to get into the Monk competition because he just didn't play hyper virtuosic, super speed, bebop, jazz kind of. He had this very, very specific language. He was a very, very quirky, singular, and unique human being who brought his humanity to the instrument.
Yes, he did.
And that made him the master of all. And I'm going to say this now in public. That made him the greatest living jazz musician that ever walked the face of the earth.
Wow.
But he took what he had,
yes,
made it work in his fashion, and created he was the prototypical invention of a jazz musician because it was surely through the power of his personality and humanity that he brought magic to the world. And that's what it's about.
All right.
It's about not looking to be ratified or credentialized or looking to get something or get something you don't have. It's about using what you have,
yes,
what you are,
yes,
to be bigger.
Oh, God, this was wonderful. I just want to say thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing with us. Oh, God, I had such a great time. This has been a great show.
I've enjoyed this tremendously.
So I'm going to let you go, and I wish you a great performance for honoring Thelonious Monk, for yourself, for your band. And we're going to take a break now and bring on our last guest. Thank you so much. And we are back with State of the Arts NYC for our anniversary show. We're about to wrap it up. It was fantastic to hear from old guests that were on our show that really made a difference. We were, right there when Basquiat's work, sold at $110 million. And we have been at pace when it comes to galleries, museums, giving special exhibitions, honoring different time periods, artists, and works. We have been there with great musicians and performance artists. This is what we do here every single week, covering all 5 boroughs, making sure that our listeners get the best of what New York City has to offer. It can't just be about doom and gloom. It has to be about quality of life. It has to be about inspiration, and that's what we do here. So thank you again, everyone, for listening to our anniversary show, and we look forward to giving you the best of the arts in New York City every single week. Bye-bye.
On November 24th to December 10th at the Cinema Village, Mist Harlem, and Teachers College, Columbia University. Celebrate Black life on the big screen with the African Diaspora International Film Festival. Discover over 60 entertaining and revealing fiction and documentary films, including 34 U.S. and New York premieres such as Mama Africa, Miriam Makeba, Sammy Davis Jr., I've Gotta Be Me, the Canadian political satire Black Cop, and more. The African Diaspora International Film Festival from November 24th to December 10th. For tickets and schedule, go online to myadiff.org or call 212-864-1760. Enjoy your world on the big screen.
There was a song came on the radio, a guitar instrumental, and it changed everything.
Link Ray, it's rock and roll.
Rumble. Yeah, that's the one.
Rumble.
Hey, Rumble.
Rumble had the power to help me say, I'm going to be a musician.
And then I found out that he was an Indian.
The music that we know here in the United States is fully supported by input from Native and indigenous people.
Say hello, this is John Kane from Let's Talk. Come join Cindy Campbell from the Midnight Ravers on I, Wednesday, November 29th at 7:30 p.m. for the screening of Rumble, the Indians Who Rock the World, at the Cinema Arts Center in Huntington, New York.
Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky. Stormy weather.
This Tuesday, November 21st at 8 p.m., he's back.
Hi, I'm meteorologist Tom Weissmuller. Every year, I do the annual winter forecast